Okay, so thanks for sitting down with us. It's been about a year. It's been a long year. Just to kind of get things going, can you kind of summarize for us the most significant changes that have happened in the department since you took office at October 15th last year?
Wow, there's been a lot of great things that have happened in this first year. For one, we started an accreditation and compliance unit that the department didn't have, and that's comprised of a civilian compliance and accreditation specialist, as well as a sworn detective that's assigned there. We also brought in a civilian PIO, your counterpart, for the first time ever for the Denton Police Department, which was big. We're actually in the process right now of starting a public safety officer program, which is going to be civilians that will combine with our existing parking enforcement to not just do parking enforcement duties, but to also be able to take old report calls, process burglary scenes, both vehicles as well as residences and non-residences. They'll be able to pick up evidence and transport it. They'll be able to help officers out on the street to, help us get better evidence when it comes to looking to build cases and prosecute those crimes that are really crimes of opportunity when you're looking at burglary.
So when we're talking about, can you talk more about that kind of how that's going to look like when you're talking about combining various offices or whatnot? Can you just talk more
Sure.
about that kind of?
So the parking enforcement that we have now, there's 3 people that work during the day, so they're going to stay on day hours, and they're also going to become public safety officers as the 3 new hires come on board. The new hires will be working evenings and nights, and that's really to support patrol. We want our men and women out there on patrol to be able to have some uncommitted time so they can not just proactively patrol, but more importantly, they can stop, get out of their cars, engage with our community, and build lasting relationships, which is really what policing is all about.
What has been the biggest surprise or the most kind of unexpected aspect of being chief as opposed to being assistant chief and so on?
I'd been told before by some mentors of mine there's a big difference between being number 2 and number 1. I can conclusively tell you that that is absolutely true. No longer do I get questions or get requests for information and be able to turn around and have someone else to give it to. Now it's mine. That's a great thing, but it's also a lot more involved than you would think, going from an assistant chief to a chief. I can tell you one of the most pleasant surprises has been this community overall. This community and its overwhelming support, not just for law enforcement, but for public safety across the board, has been amazing. The partner agencies here in Denton County have been incredible to work with. Building those relationships has really been seamless. And I can tell you that's probably one of the biggest surprises for me coming here.
And of course, not every case rises to the public's attention, but some obviously do, some
Right.
make the news and whatnot. I guess we would say the bigger cases.
Yes.
What would you say, looking over your past year, what cases stand out to you as defining cases for the year specifically itself?
The biggest case in my mind would be Sarbesh Gurung case. That was a watershed moment, not just for the police department, but for me personally. Us working through that tragedy, dealing with it internally and externally with the community as a whole, really helped us change some patterns and practices that we had. We have really worked hard to craft a missing persons policy, and we added a high-risk missing persons part of that, as well as look at how we do pattern searches and grid searches when we're looking for anybody that's missing or lost. And working with some officers inside the department, we really put together a very innovative approach to it. We worked with a nonprofit, Kids in Cars. They're based out of Kansas City. And I can tell you that the policy that came out of that is amazing. We shared it with Kids in Cars. They're actually sharing it with some law enforcement agencies already. And we're hoping that becomes best practice in our profession.
Can you talk more specifically, when you're talking about the kind of approach to looking for missing persons and whatnot, can you say more specifically along those lines and what that looks like?
Sure, we can talk a little bit about it. So we're going to have a volunteer coordinator that's going to be obviously someone sworn. They're going to meet with our command post personnel, which will most likely be a lieutenant from the police department and a battalion chief from Denton Fire. We're going to have them get the initial briefing with the rest of the officers out there. Then we're going to have an area where we collect volunteers if there are people that want to come out, because you can recall in Sarbesh's case, we had an overwhelming number of community members come out to help in that search. So we're going to have them in a volunteer area. We'll have that coordinator go over and pair them up with an officer. So it'll be one volunteer per officer. They'll go out in teams of 4, so it looks like 2 and 2, or 3 and 1 if we get 3 officers and 1 civilian. They're going to have a log sheet that they go and they'll notate every car that they search, every handle they touch, as well as every apartment or house door that they knock on. And we'll get the names, addresses, and telephone numbers, contact information for people we come across. And we're also going to mark on the back of the cars as well as on the residences when we go past those. It's going to be washable ink, so it's going to be really easy for us to clean off after the search is over. But we're just putting in stopgaps to make sure that we conclusively could say that we searched this entire parking lot and we leave nothing to chance. And the cars that we can't get inside and physically clear, there's going to be a distinct marking on those. So as we come back, we can attempt to make contact with the registered owner. So hopefully people will keep up with their registrations when they move, so it doesn't come back to another address from a different city. We can hopefully make contact with them, get them to come out, open their car up.
And we've already talked about one, of course, the search for Sarbash, but there have other been, other
There has.
profile
Yeah.
cases. Obviously, y'all addressed the incidents that happened, particularly the one that happened at Harvest House with
Right.
The assault there. And there's the incident over the same weekend with rubber gloves, and we talked about those obviously being separate incidents.
Yes.
Did any changes come from either one of those instances in terms of how y'all handled these types of cases moving forward?
So we took a step back and we looked at those like we do on every major case that especially grabs the attention of the community, because if it's important to you all, it's important to us, right? Because we're part of the community. So we really went back in and we looked at, because it didn't meet the criminality of a hate crimes charge, we still need to document those and track those. So if you're involved in a hate incident, so they'll be titled hate incidents, those that don't reach the criminality of a hate crime. If you're involved in one of those incidents, like rubber gloves or at Harvest House, we track it. So if you were then involved in an actual hate crime a year later, you're painting swastikas on the side of a building, you're assaulting someone because of their protected class, we can go back and hopefully build a better case for prosecution, knowing that we have already documented these instances where you have been involved in a hate incident, and now it rolls into a hate crime. So I think that's probably the biggest change for us. And, got mixed reviews in the community, which I totally get. But I think that when you start talking, you say the word tracking, people assume that you're talking about us tracking you, the person. We're not. We're tracking the incidents that happen so we can come back and, annotate that later on.
Yeah. And then, of course, obviously, y'all made the announcement in mid-September that y'all had updated the hate crimes and incidents policy. Is
Right.
that's the same thing we're talking
Yes,
about there?
it is.
Can you kind of show what not to be redundant, but what actually changes from how things were done before to now with the new implementation?
So there wasn't a hate incident title code in our report management system, and it's not atypical for a police department not to track hate incidents because it's hard to kind of quantify what rises to that level. But these are 2 perfect incidents where people that are part of what is labeled as a white supremacist group, a white nationalist group, they're involved in something that has the tinges of race or protected class built into it, but again, it doesn't rise to the criminality of it actually being a hate crime. We need to be able to report that, keep it, log it, so we can go back and search it easier later on.
And so is that a direct result of those incidents or kind of trends that you're seeing in law enforcement across the country, or both? Or
It's a little bit of both. The International Associations of Chiefs of Police actually put out some best practices about a year and a half ago. The day that we put ours out was shortly after Arlington rolled theirs out. And again, got mixed reviews in Arlington like it did here. But you're seeing these incidents that are spurring up across the country that don't rise to the level of a hate crime, that chiefs like myself and some of my peers think it's important for us to start tracking those for a lot of different reasons. But our society right now is so splintered in different factions. I can see an uptick in those continuing in the next couple of years, unfortunately.
Other notable cases, the Isaac Warner case, we know that after even y'all's own review found that there were, I think there was like about a dozen calls in the weeks and months leading up to the incident.
Right.
Has anything changed on that end in terms of how y'all take those calls? Has anything changed simply as a result of that case?
That was just such an extremely tragic case, worst case scenario in the mental health community. The things that we found that we could do or we can improve upon is just documenting those instances where we could not arrest Isaac or we could not forcefully send him to get services. So when something like this comes up, we can go back in there and look to those reports. I'm also looking at trying to get every single police officer in here certified as a full mental health peace officer in the state of Texas. Not just for the sake of being able to take someone and involuntarily commit them, but it really talks about when you're talking about policing properly, de-escalation, communication, it all rolls into that conversation. So when we're out and we're dealing with people that are not in full mental health crisis, but we know that there's a mental health component to it, again, we need to start tracking those calls, but having our police officers being able to recognize some of the symptoms of someone that may be suffering from mental illness so we can document and hopefully get some good follow-up to get them services before it manifests itself.
And we know one officer, and I think this was an incident that you inherited, is the officer Rita Buchanan, whose case was dismissed recently.
Right.
We're wondering what's going to happen to the officer. Is she going to be back on the force, or what is the update there?
So she does have another case pending in Dallas County, so we're not going to talk about the criminal cases, but I can tell you that administratively I did indefinitely suspend her on September 20th. She has appealed that. So pending the appeal, we're not going to talk too much about the case because, she has rights just like every other peace officer in the state of Texas. And once that appeal has run its course, we'll wait for the decision from the arbiter, and we have to respect the process, right? That's why these laws are on the books. So
pending still, depending on the outcome.
Right, the final disposition is still pending.
So we have a bond election, coming up that's been
Yes.
talked about, not just concerning the police department, of course, lots of stuff. So, talk about what's in the bond election for the police department. Basically, what are y'all trying to get money to spend on?
Well, without getting too detailed, because you and I talked about this before, but the money's going to go towards renovating this existing facility. It's going to go to build our first substation ever for the police department in the city of Denton, and then an indoor firing range that will be located next to that substation.
And along those lines, what did you find when you came in? What were some, and I know this has kind of been reported through the course of the year, of course,
right.
But what did you find that needed to be done here in terms of, along the lines of new spaces and renovations and stuff like that?
Just coming in and taking a look around the existing facilities and what our police officers were working under and the conditions they were working under, there was a lot of room for us to improve. And it wasn't anything that City Hall was already working on a lot of that when I got here, including the outdoor range. As this city continues to grow, and we haven't really hit the stride in our full growth yet, but it's coming. You look at all the businesses are starting to encroach upon our existing outdoor range, and it really limits the things that we could do out there. So that was one thing that I really want to look at critically because of not just the conditions for the officer shooting, but for the overall safety of the public in general.
So I think one of the things we talked about when you first came in was acknowledging how competitive it is to hire in law enforcement right now.
Yes.
Reported that's not just a Denton police thing. What is the hiring situation here right now? How many vacancies do you have, if any? What are you looking to fill? Give us kind of an update on how it's going with hiring.
So currently we have 9 vacancies, and that includes 4 that we just got October 1 in the new budget. So we got 4 positions added this year for sworn officers. We are competing with everybody in the Metroplex. The great thing about the Metroplex is there's a lot of cities up here, a lot of things to do. The bad thing about it is there's a lot of cities, a lot of police departments, and we're all recruiting essentially the same people, right? We had a civil service exam a month ago, on the same day that another city in the Metroplex did, and we still had 66 people show up. So I think that really speaks to, there's still a lot of people out there that have the heart to serve, which is amazing. We are finding challenges across the profession overall of people being qualified to be police officers. So we're not going to shrink our standards to get more people hired quicker. We're going to keep our standards where they're at, or we're going to raise them, because we want the best people with the best hearts serving the community here in Denton or anywhere else in this profession, because there's too much riding on it.
So the city settled in, I think it was January, with Cleo Burke-Beckler. It was the race discrimination case. And of course, this is a situation that you inherited, and that was something
Right.
that came from the last organization, or the last administration. But you did come in your swearing and talking about, a demand for a mutual respect among officers. And
Definitely.
And since that, would you say that situation, the department has moved past that situation, or has the department had to address the underlying criticism, which obviously was race discrimination? I guess to summarize again, has the department moved past that, or are y'all still dealing with it with that, or how is that situation?
When I got here, I didn't really see a lot of outward signs of any kind of division within the police department. But again, from before I got the job to my swearing in and every day since, the consistent message has been, we're treating everyone with dignity and respect, internally and externally. If we're not treating each other right inside these walls, there's no way in the world we're treating people right out in the street. So that has always been my top priority, and it will continue to be. We're always looking to get better, so we're getting a lot of training. The police officers here in the last year have gotten more training than some of them would prefer. It's been a nonstop training, including 2 different trainings on dealing with autism. You've got investigating animal cruelty that officers have gotten. You've gotten, improved response to active shooter. There's just been a lot. Strangulation when it comes to investigating reports of family violence, specifically strangulation cases. So they have gotten a lot of training this past calendar year. The message has been, get used to it, because training is going to be a part of this culture. So moving forward, it's not going to be all so rapidly deployed, but it's going to be constant and ongoing.
Right. So you mentioned earlier working with other agencies. Obviously, we have universities here, at county, and all kinds of
Right.
cities around us. Can you elaborate more on kind of your experience in working with these other agencies, whether they be locally here or even, of course, state or even federal agencies?
Mm-hmm. So I actually had the opportunity to meet Chief Reynolds and Chief Garrison, so from UNTPD and TWU, Department of Public Safety. They both actually sat on one of my hiring panels. So I got to meet them before I was actually hired. I met with Chief Shaw from North Central Texas College shortly after I got here, and I met with Sheriff Murphy when I first got here, and we continue to talk, the 4 of us continue to talk on an ongoing basis, because what touches us touches everyone. What touches UNT campus touches the entire city. So collectively, the relationship has been great. We work hand in hand on a lot of different things. Every Wednesday through Saturday, you'll see UNT police officers out on Fry Street with our police officers. They work hand in hand, seamless. UNT takes calls for service. If they're out driving around, they roll up on a crash. A lot of times they'll get out and just take that crash and handle it themselves, because they're full vested peace officers in the state. Same thing with TWU. You'll see them running traffic on the side streets surrounding the campus, enforcing traffic law. It doesn't just keep that campus safe, but it keeps us all collectively safe. And then obviously Denton County has county jurisdiction, so we work with them. A lot of the events on the square, because there's so many of them, we work with them almost on a weekly basis for those.
And then along those lines of working with the Sheriff's Office, we've been reporting that y'all are overseeing the internal over at the Sheriff's Office with a recent officer-involved shooting, and according to the department, that hasn't been done in recent history, quote. Can you tell us how that is or was done, and kind of
Sure.
who's involved, and about the process, and how your department, how that works with the other agency calls and says, we need your help, how that comes about and what actually kind of happens?
Sure. So, there's been a misnomer about us overseeing the investigation. So what we're going to do is our major crimes unit is going to get the complete investigation from Denton County when they're done, all the evidence, body camera footage, everything. And we're going to sit down and they're going to go over they're going to critique the investigation. So we're going to use them, we're going to use members of our crime scene unit, and we're going to use the expertise sprinkled throughout the department to sit down and critically go through it. They're then going to come in and brief the entire executive team, including myself, with their findings. And then they're going to craft a report that's going to be sent over to the Denton County District Attorney's Office for them. I can tell you that it's not uncommon for law enforcement agencies to help one another. Since I've been here, we have responded for requests for assistance for a number of agencies outside of the city, for our SWAT team, for investigations, for a lot of different things. I can remember us going out to Little Elm to help, Oak Point we have helped. We've helped TWU with a death investigation not too long ago. So it's not unique, us helping Denton County. I got a phone call from the sheriff asking if we would help them, and we're not going to turn down a fellow law enforcement agency. It does no good for not just the two agencies and the working components, but the men and women involved in those critical incidents. They don't need added stress, right? And then the community. While there's no law governing that we must go to an outside agency to be a second set of eyes, it's best practice for transparency when you're talking about continuing to build the legitimacy and trust of law enforcement in the community. That's one of the biggest components of that.
So the Packers beat the Cowboys recently. So what's your prediction? Do you think that you'll see your team will have to play the Cowboys again in the playoffs?
I'm hoping they do. That's still kind of raw for some people that I'm a Packers fan, but I can tell you that I've gone to a few Dallas Cowboy games when they were not playing the Packers, and I do cheer for the Cowboys on every other Sunday except for that one. And if they do end up meeting again in the playoffs, hopefully it's in Lambeau, and hopefully we win.
So when you're talking about being in the community and whatnot, kind of favorite places that I know that there are many places to eat, but do you have any favorites that you go to, like particular spots that you go to?
Yeah, if someone's looking for the chief of police during lunch, you're going to find me down around the square or on Industrial. Chestnut Tree, LSA, Cartwrights, Hoochie's, Roosters. You're going to find me at one of those places down there.
Got it. I'm
going to eat local, spend our money local, and it's good food.
What can we expect? What are some of the big? What are some of the things that we can expect in the near future from you in the department?
You can see a lot. There's a lot on the horizon for us. For the first time in decades, in the not too distant future, we're going to be changing our patch and our badge. That came about from some internal discussions, and we have a lot of younger officers in this department that have brilliant minds. They come up with some things they want to try out, and I'm not the no guy. I'm not going to tell them no. Let's look at it. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll change course. So when this idea came up, it initially was going to be a sesquicentennial for 2023. That would be our 150-year anniversary. But as we got the badge and we started looking at it, and other officers in the department start looking at it, they really liked it. So they were like, why do we have to wait until 2023? Let's just adopt that badge now, which then spurred a conversation about the patch, and we looked at a lot of different designs and iterations of it, and we finally settled on one. And it's time for us to remarket ourselves, rebrand ourselves, and really put out there that it's a new day for us as a department. There's nothing wrong with the past at all. There's nothing wrong with the patch and the badge that we have now at all. It's all about us finding our identity collectively as an agency as we move into 2020 and beyond.
So when we're talking about remarketing, does that mean we're going to see new wording, new slogans and stuff like that, or are we going to see? Is it just going to be the patch and the badge? What else can we see when we're talking about remarketing, rebranding? What can we expect?
Well, you're definitely going to see our mission, vision, and value statement more prominently displayed inside of our organization, because again, it's all about us doing our job. If you just do your job and not worry about all the other things that you don't have control over, we become a much better organization as a team, We deliver much better service to the community, and things just get better. I want cops coming to work with a smile on their face, having fun, enjoying it, because this is truly one of the best jobs in the world. You don't come to work every day for the same thing. Every call is different. You get the opportunity of really impacting people's lives positively in the worst of circumstances, so embrace that. It's a privilege to be a police officer. It's not a right. So we have to work to keep that right, to wear the badge, the privilege of wearing the badge, serving the community every day. And that's a big part of it.
I mean, just kind of going back to the original question, what other kind of, what else can we kind of see?
I wrote down a couple of things. So we just started a lateral police officer hiring process, which will afford us the opportunity to bring in experienced police officers from outside the agency much more seamlessly than we had before. We just actually posted on our social media yesterday afternoon our first iteration of trying to start that hiring. We've already gotten 2 applications of current Texas peace officers that would like to come here and serve this community. We want to make sure they're going to be a right fit for us no matter where they're coming from. We're still going to critique their backgrounds and go in there and make sure that we're getting the best police officers we can for the city. But if we can get experienced officers here where we can train them, equip them, and get them on the street faster to help with the shortages of officers we have, it's a win-win for everybody.